Hello there, this is RomWills coming back at you with yet another video. The city you're in plays a major part in the game. Yeah, that was a long title, but this is very important because remember I always talk about the pillars of the game as outlined a while ago by the master teacher BGS, and he did that on Blog Talk. He didn't do it on here, so don't ask where the video is, and I don't know where the radio recording is. But he outlined four parts. The other three parts were your bait, how you drawing the woman to you, your conversation, how you talking to the woman, and sex. But he also talked about environment. Environment, that's very important. Whatever city you're living in. I remember I was on a panel with a young lady years ago, relationship panel, in the real world. Remember, I'd done some real world stuff. And we're in Baltimore. And she was talking about the difference between Baltimore men and Washington, D.C. men. She said the men in the D.C. area were more suave, whereas the men in Baltimore were more rough. And that's any city. Any city, you go to any city, is going to be different. You have to approach differently. Like using the Baltimore, Washington, D.C. example, you gotta be a little bit more rougher in Baltimore. You gotta be a little bit more thorough, more direct. But that's the population. Whereas DC, you can be a little bit more suave. There's more professionals down there. So, and that's anywhere you go. Whenever you're in a certain environment, you have to pay attention to that environment. Indeed, depending on where you are, you might have more opportunities with women in one environment than you do in another environment. I remember I saw a clip and it was on YouTube, and it was talking about the cities where the hookup cultures were the best. I mean, somebody actually listed this. And it was talking about the hookup cultures in different cities in Virginia. And it was actually better as with the counties and cities that were closer to DC than it was further out. Because it was talking about how many bars were in that particular city and how many people were in that particular city. And that's one thing. It depends. Now remember, in the last sit-down video, I talked about social class. And I've talked about social class before. So it depends. It depends not just on you, but what social class is in your area. Are you in a poor area, or are you in a area that's more upper middle class, or even a rich area? That's going to be different. Because I've said before, if you're dealing with more lower class women, you got to be more like her. You got to be more direct with it. Whereas when you're dealing with more upper class women, you got to be more suave. You can't just walk up to them and say, hey, you's a big fine woman, won't you back that thing up? Maybe with a lower class woman, but you can't do that. I mean, that's not saying you're indirect, but even your voice intonation has to be different. If you're dealing with a more lower class woman, you can be rougher, but you might have to tone it down a bit when you're dealing with the upper class woman. But all of that depends on the region you're in. Now, I've mentioned several times there's a big difference between the women where I live now and then in the modest apartment I used to live in. Very big difference. It's almost like night and day. The women were rougher around there. They were rougher, smoking, had the tats, everything. I see the women around here, I can't really think of really even seeing tats on the women. They're more professional. This is a more professional area. This little enclave I live in is a more professional area. So I have to treat the women differently. And that can even be in the city or a town that you're in. There's a lot of guys who are having trouble with women. And quite frankly, they need to move. See, that's one thing you got to take in consideration. What type of person are you first? Are you more intellectual Or are you more the type that's going to hang out, go to the local pool place? I remember I was in Atlanta for a self-improvement summit. Shout out C Boogie. And we had an after party, of course. And I actually went to the wrong place and I was hanging out. I went to the wrong place, was hanging out and just paying attention. And these were just some guys in there playing pool, doing their thing. But then it was a different vibe when I went to the right place. You have to think about that. What city you live in, what area you live in, what type of women are there. Are they the type of women who would naturally be in cooperation with the operation? You have to pay attention to all of that because that's the game. That's the game, the environment you're in. You might not be in the right environment. You might have to move. You might have to travel. You might not be in the right city. I've known some guys, I've talked with some guys, everything changed up just by them changing the city that they were living in, just by changing the city. Like using the Baltimore, Washington example. If someone's coming up from DC to the Baltimore area, they're gonna have to be rougher. They gotta be more direct. But if they're going from Baltimore to DC, they gotta be a bit more suave. In fact, I've noticed that in women up and down the East Coast because I've been up and down the East Coast. I've been to Atlanta. I noticed the women in Atlanta were a bit more friendlier than the women in the Baltimore area or the Washington, D.C. area. They were a bit more friendlier. It was like, yeah, you could just talk to them. But then as being someone who's been to school in Philly and been to New York a few times, I had to be rougher. It's like as you going north, you gotta be rougher with it, more direct. You can be a little bit more chilled as you went south. And those are just cities on the East Coast. In fact, I've been to San Diego a few times and I actually inquired for my friend out there. My friend, my cousin, play cousin, whatever you want to call him. I said, hey, dude, the men do a little bit better out there. Because I noticed when I went out there, the women were a bit friendlier. They were coming to me. So you had to pay attention to that. I would say LA, but let's just say I was busy in LA with someone, so I couldn't really check out the area. But that's the thing. You have to think about where you at, what city you're at, what town you're at, shoot, maybe even what country you're at. Many men who are traveling overseas, they'll say the women in this particular country are friendlier than in this particular country. You have to pay attention to that, but that plays a major part in the game because it depends on how receptive they're going to be towards you. You might not be able, you might be in one city and you might not be getting any attention, and then all you do is move, and then all of a sudden you got more attention than you know what to deal with. But then you got to look at different factors. You got to look at the class, the businesses, how the women might dress, how their visual shorthand. You got to pay attention to all of those factors. So it plays a major part in the game. In fact, in my next sit down, I'm talk about some other factors that has to be taken into consideration in my next sit down, all right? So until then, I'll get back with y'all. Peace and blessings.